This is a Sports Catastrophe production.
Hey there, Heather Ho, there's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to another Sports Catastrophe Birthday Boy. And the birthday boy for today, December the 7th, is a former NHL goalie who's in the Hockey Hall of Fame since 1985, the year of my birth. He's an icon in both the NHL and the WHA, which was the World Hockey Association, which was supposed to be the distant relative and try to force the NHL's hand on a lot of things, which kind of worked. However, this guy has played 2 stints in the NHL, both with the same team. He never left the team. Well, actually, he did play for the Leafs. People forget about that. But anyway, well, I did too, briefly. Anyway, he's now 84 years old. His name is Jerry Cheevers. Not Gary, Cherry Cheevers. Cheerry. Anyway, his playing career started while in the OHA. Well, he was born in St. Catharines. He went to the St. Mike's Majors of the OHA, which was a pretty decent OHL team. The Leafs actually held his NHL contract for a few games. Now, back then, before 1963, you would be picked by a team could sign you without having subject you to a draft. So he was having his rights with the Leafs. They needed a goalie, in a sense, to keep Bauer fresh because, Johnny Bauer was getting up there in age. Boston drafted him in 1965 in the intra-league draft, which is something the NHL did for years in the 50s and 60s, that you had to protect so many players at the end of the season on your roster, and whoever did not get protected would be subject to be drafted by the 6 other teams. And all that. The Leafs wanted to make Jerry Cheevers a forward so that no team could draft him, but Boston did. He was claimed in the offseason and played for Boston. Well, anyway, the Leafs had him as the number 1 AHL goalie, the minor league goalie. He was actually the final goalie in AHL history, that's the minor leagues, of course, to play every game. And with his 48 wins, he helped Rochester win the Calder Cup for the first time, and that's the most victories in a season by a goalie. Only 100 teams could get to 50 wins. Anyway, Boston drafted him in that interleague draft, and then he saw his first action with the Bruins in the 66 season, playing pretty much the next few years in the farm system. Cheevers was only number 1 in a sense because of the fact that Boston ended up losing both Brady Perrault and Doug Favell in the expansion draft in 1967 to the Flyers, meaning that they had to start fresh. Cheevers was basically their goalie. So he would be there and he would reward Boston. And helped Boston win the Stanley Cup in 1970-72, knowing he was a driven, money goaltender, which means he was okay in the regular season, but when it came time for the playoffs, that's when he really was at his prime peak. So regardless of that, Cheevers was a great goalie. He had 53 wins in the playoffs as a Bruins goalie, and that was the Bruins record till Tuukka Rask broke it in 2021. So yeah, it took a while. Yeah, Cheevers knew what he was doing for Boston, the Big Back Bruins, and could have won 3 in a row had they not choked in 71 to those pesky Hamiltons. And in 1972, he put up an undefeated streak of 32 games, meaning he never lost in 32 games. Well, there were a lot of ties, mostly because the NHL still in the 70s, even though that they were supposed to take ties out, take overtime out in the 40s and then bring it back once the war started. They continued to have no overtime until 1983. In the regular season, that is. The playoffs, you can't have ties in the playoffs. Anyway, in the fall of '72, he made a giant move to the WHA and practically was the big domino that fell. Well, Bobby Hall signing with Winnipeg after leaving the Blackhawks was the first major domino, but then Cheevers decided to leave the Stanley Cup champion Boston Bruins to jump to the World Hockey Association playing for Cleveland. He was like a superstar for Cleveland and the WHA, trying to bring the WHA into prominence, which he did. So anyway, Cheevers did well in the WHA, and he even took part in the '74 Summit Series for Canada. Cheevers, I think, would have definitely been one of the goalies for Canada in the '72 Summit Series with the NHL pros, but he jumped to the WHA, which meant he was ineligible, just like Bobby Hall. Cheevers played 7 of the 8 games for Canada in the '74 Summit Series, like I said. That was when the Russians would play the WHA legendary team. And unfortunately for that team, Canada, A, they weren't highly publicized in Canada because they were WHA. They were renegades, if you will. And B, they sucked. They only won 1 game. Cheevers would actually switch from the WHA back to the NHL based on financial problems with Cleveland. And of course, the WHA had like franchise shifts every year. So Cheevers would go back to Boston and would be partnered with Gilles Gilbert, and they were a good goalie tandem. They almost won the Vezina Trophy. Back then, before 1981, the Vezina was given to the goalie or goalies. Well, you had to play 25 games. That had the fewest goals against, if you will. So yeah, the Cheevers almost won the Vezina, which was won by Everton Sauve of Buffalo. Cheevers would pick up 230 career NHL wins and 289 goals against average. Well, of course, he retired from hockey in 1980. He was actually second in WHA history for career goals against average and shutouts, even though he only played during half the league's existence. If he had stayed in the WHA, he probably would have been the best goalie ever. I think Joe Daly has those marks. Anyway, he put up 329 wins combined in the NHL and WHA. He would have had a 300-win campaign, alongside Mike Liu and Bernie Perron. So anyway, he actually was inducted to the Hall of Fame in 1985, which was good. However, he's one of the few goalies in the Hall of Fame to never be an All-Star on the All-Star team or win the Vezina. Regardless of that, Cheevers was not afraid to trade for the crease to cut down the shooter's angle or become a third defenseman. Anyway, that's what happened. Of course, everyone knows about Gary Cheevers and his mask. That's why if you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching it, you know the picture. Anyway, Cheevers was inspired to create that such kind of mask when a puck hit him in the face during practice. He actually went to the dressing room, and then Harry Sinden, the coach, followed him to the dressing room where he found Cheevers enjoying a beer and smoking a cigarette. Annoyed, Sinden ordered Cheevers to get back on the ice. And just Frosty Forresto, the Bruins trainer, drew a stitch mark on his mask, which amused the team. After that, anytime he was similarly struck, he had a new stitch mark drawn on his mask. And Cheevers said the mask actually spared him from over 150 medical stitches. And it's actually he actually had the first custom decorated goalie mask. It's one of the most recognized of the era, and the original is now on the wall of his grandson's bedroom. So anyway, Steve Shields actually paid tribute to Cheevers when he played for the Bruins for a couple years in the 2000s by having an airbrushed version of the stage-covered mask. And actually won Hockey News award for best mask ever. Out of a possible 300 points, he had 221 points. Gilles Gratton's Lion's mask was second with 66. Cheevers' mask design has been in rock and roll culture. As the Black Veil Bride's lead singer said, it was the reason he got interested in hockey and played goalie and all that. Cheevers would actually publish a book detailing his experiences during the 1970-71 season, in which Boston was winning games left, right, and center and looked like to be the heavy favorites to get the Stanley Cup, but then they choked to the Habitants. So anyway, in the 79-80 season, Fred Creighton, who is the new head coach instead of Don Cherry, was fired, and the Bruins were fired. Harry Sinion took over. For the 80-81 season, Cheevers somehow was named head coach. I don't know why, but anyhow. The Bruins were then shockingly lost to the Minnesota North Stars in the playoffs, who were massively underdogs. I mean, the North Stars the previous year took out the Montreal Canadiens, the 4-time Stanley Cup champions, in the second round. The North Stars would actually move on to the finals, losing to the Cupcakes. I mean, the Islanders. Nevertheless, Sindon stuck with Cheevers, who actually helped the Bruins do well. They were supposed to be the best team in 1983, but then those pesky New York Islanders just had to ruin them in the semifinals. Cheevers was then canned in 84-85. He won 204 games, and his winning percentage of .604 is actually 7th in NHL history for coaches with more than 250 games. So anyway, Cheevers decided to become a color commentator for the Whalers for 9 years, and then went to Boston for a few years. He loved thoroughbred racing and all that. He would always use horses in his pressers. He said, after a game in 1972 Stanley Cup playoffs, he said he felt like Reva Ridge, who won the 1972 Kentucky Derby. So yeah, his stitch-marked mask will always be popular. He played in the 1969 All-Star Game, runner-up for Vezina in 1980. Inducted to the Hockey Hall of Fame, and was part of the WHA Hall of Fame when it opened in 2010. So he was actually a spare goalie for Canada at the Canada Cup in 1976. They didn't really need him. Rookie Vachon was on fire. And in 1979, he played Game 3 of the Challenge Cup against the Soviets after trying to play the first 2 games. They went with Cheevers, and he got shelled 6-0 by the Russians. So his NHL career with the Bruins, he put up 230 wins in 418 games, 26 shutouts. In the WHA, he won almost 100 games. He was off by just 1. And in the playoffs in the NHL, he was 53-34, 8 shutouts, 2 Stanley Cups. In the WHA, he was 7-12, so that was different. But then again, it was Cleveland. So he helped Boston as head coach, his 4 full years of head coach, 2 division wins and 2 runners-up. They got close in 1983, but those pesky Islanders ruined them. 81, they lost to the North Stars. 82, they lost to the Habitants. Was it that? No, sorry, it was Quebec, excuse me. 83, they lost to the Islanders, and 84, they lost to those pesky Habs. Had no business getting in the playoffs in the first time. So anyway, that's all we've got. He's a great Boston icon, despite the fact that I hate the Bruins. But do we? Anyway, I'm just having to do.